98 FM, this is the Saturday Social with Rachel. Good morning. Now, as you know, from Monday, the lockdown is easing even further and we're going to be able to do a lot more socialising. Restaurants, pubs are going to be opening up. And while, loads of us are really happy about this, for some, the idea of going back to normal or maybe going back into work, into the office, is bringing on social anxiety and general nervousness about being around people again. Well, here with some tips on how to overcome these feelings of anxiety is psychologist Dr. John Francis Leader. Good morning, John. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, Rachel. Great to be here.
Now, listen, we are slowly easing out of lockdown, and from Monday, we're going to be able to do a lot more socialising. Restaurants, bars will be open. And for some people, this is the best news they've ever heard, and they're delighted and excited. But, John, that is not the case for everyone, because actually coming out of lockdown can be quite an anxious time for people who might have social anxiety or just general anxiety about things going back to quote-unquote normal.
And you're right. And I think what Leo has done in making Monday much more of a kind of a key date has actually worked against some people who were kind of saying, I can push you to the next stage. I can push re-engagement to the next stage. Because there was always that sense of there's something else to come. Now you're exactly right. So many people are kind of getting back to it. And that's a little bit of a cliff edge for some people, to be fair. And I think there's probably two groups I find that I'm working with who've experienced that. One is people who've maybe been a bit socially anxious to begin with, and for the whole lockdown experience, in a weird way, people might have said, was it a challenge? But for them, it was a little bit of shelter. It was a bit of breathing space to kind of share their common experience with other people. The other group, though, is a really interesting group, who are the people who you would have never thought would have had the time of day for social anxiety before, but they have kind of almost learned a bit of social anxiety through, it's like not using muscles and them atrophying a bit over the past while. So even though beforehand they wouldn't have considered themselves to be socially anxious, now re-engaging is a bit scary. So there's two groups. It's fascinating.
And particularly, I suppose, for people who maybe had been very social before and maybe now they're working from home, and like certain people who maybe are single or don't have kids literally will not have seen people from one end of the week to the next.
100%.
Is it possible to develop, like someone who's generally extroverted, is it possible to become more introverted?
In degrees, and probably that muscle tone example is probably the easiest way of thinking about it. You kind of use it or lose it to some extent. Now, don't worry, that doesn't mean you can't get it back again. And even for people who would be a bit more introverted generally, it doesn't mean they can't develop it as well if they want to. But I think one of the big questions, and I think the lockdown for many people has been a kind of an existential period to reflect a bit, for good or for bad, on who you are, where you're coming from, and where you're going. And the thing is, you don't have to be extrovert. I mean, that's really important to appreciate. Some people do like to hang out in large groups, other people smaller groups, other people like their alone time a bit more. It's absolutely fine with degrees, but I think that's the thing we can hopefully do, is question now, what do you actually want as you re-engage again? And, it's not just fear speaking to us, I suppose. I like the idea of that, but I'm scared, so I won't. That's more where the social anxiety comes in. I want the social interaction, but I'm afraid of how people will perceive me, or I'm uncomfortable. That's more of the social anxiety that can be worked on. But on the other hand, if somebody says, actually, I've learned that I like a bit of me time as part of this, but I can still have a healthy balance of some interaction with other people, that's fair enough, I think.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that. I mean, I suppose if you've discovered that, hey, I've been giving too much of myself to people, too much of my free time, it's okay to say, hey, I'm going to actually start taking more time to myself from now on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, completely. What I've been trying to encourage people to do over the past while in preparing for this moment, and I think people have, just on their own initiative been doing this anyway as we've been re-engaging, is like when you're, I don't want to say training for marathon. Hopefully Monday won't be that bad. But when you are getting in shape again, I suppose the key thing is not to go into the gym on day one and pick up the heaviest bit of equipment you can and just kill yourself using it. That's not good. But nor do you not exercise at all. So it's to kind of practice that re-engaging a little bit. Firstly, clarify, as we said, how much re-engagement do you want in this kind of new phase of your life? But then to practice it a bit, so to try and reach out to the people maybe you haven't been in contact with as much, and just to kind of practice that interaction, even to visualize it, to imagine it going well, because you're kind of stretching those mental muscles a bit.
That's really, really interesting and really important. I suppose it's almost like baby steps. You're not going to throw yourself in the deep end if you haven't seen anyone for, 3 months at this stage. It's a bit like here in the office, people are starting to come back now, but, gradually, like one day there'll be another person, the next day 2 more people arrive. So it's kind of coming in dribs and drabs. So it's not like an overload for the senses. So it's a bit like that, I suppose, when you start to socialise, like you were saying, just taking baby steps, maybe meeting someone for a short walk one day and, easing yourself back into it.
Exactly. So if you can kind of manage that yourself where possible, that's usually good advice to practice kind of warming up those mental muscles, essentially getting your communication, skills kind of back again, because again, they don't disappear, but they just need a bit of a refresher. It is going to be a bit weird for everyone.
Yes.
It's like if you've been online dating and you're meeting the person for the first time almost. It just kind of, it's like, oh my God, this is very real. It is going to feel a bit strange. So don't feel alone, I think, is the advice on that.
Yeah, and I think that's a brilliant thing to remember if you're having any kind of anxiety, is that you're not alone. Pretty much, 90% of people have some form of anxiousness, and they're worried about how they're looking, you're worried about how you're looking. We're all in this together, I think, is the main thing to remember.
It is so true, and that's so unique, you know, because usually, because I work or help people with so many different topic areas, but very often, some people experience it, other people don't. But this is such a shared experience. And of course, we all react in different ways, and we shouldn't, try and pretend everybody's affected the same. But at the same time, at least there's some common experience. People, I think, guess where we're coming from. So that really does help.
Now, John, one area that I think we've all become even more familiar with during lockdown, and I know you've done a lot of work on this, is technology. Obviously, lots of Zoom calls, quizzes, meetings, a lot more things are happening online now. And while I suppose there's a huge benefit to that, in other ways, are we become so reliant on technology that the face-to-face interactions are becoming scarier?
Yeah, and that is part of it. It is like this mental muscle thing again of just what you get used to using. Now, it's interesting because it's kind of gone the other way as well. There were a lot of people who were absolutely terrified of connecting via technology, for example, to do online therapy sessions. So many therapists have been practicing that way over the past while, and various people who were just uncomfortable, I suppose, connecting up or being on video camera or connecting that way, who have kind of overcome that and got comfortable with it. And it's actually benefiting them today because now they can keep in touch more easily, maybe with friends or family or grandkids on the other side of the world. And they just kind of moved into that mode. So that is beneficial. But you're right, it also goes the other direction, that you kind of get habituated to doing it that way. So then moving into face-to-face mode gets uncomfortable. So like a lot of good courses do nowadays, the word blended learning is sometimes used. And I think that's really what we want for this century that we're in, is embracing this good mix of real face-to-face interaction and obviously physical contact when and that's appropriate again. But as well, being able to use the phone call, being able to use the text message, being able to use the video call when they're appropriate as well. And I think so many workplaces are considering that now, for practical reasons. Do we need to get people to drive from the other side of town and be in a room for 20 minutes meeting when, maybe we could do that online. However, if you just do it all remotely, something might get lost as well, and we want the face-to-face interaction. So hopefully that's something we've retained actually from the past few months, is the ability to adapt once we re-engage again with the face-to-face.
Absolutely, and it's using technology, I suppose, as part of your day-to-day, but not the sole thing you use to communicate. And actually, I think some people will be delighted because it will really cut down meeting times and
100%.
maybe unnecessary meetings.
You're exactly right. You using the technology rather than the technology using you. Having it as one of many tools in your toolbox.
Yeah, and absolutely some brilliant tips there. John, if people want to get some more or to find out more about yourself, where can they head to?
Yeah, simplest place to go is jfl.com and Dr. John Francis Leader. So JFL, easy way to type that, jfl.com. Also, a lot of videos on YouTube, some guidance there. You'll find the links from jfl.com. And also every Thursday evening at 8 p.m. we have a live session as well where we get together and do a Q&A on YouTube Live. So you feel welcome to tune in then.
Sounds super. John, thank you so much for your time on the show today.
Always great to chat to you.
The Saturday Social with Rachel Ryan. 98 FM.